As you know, today is the second Sunday of Christmas. It's also day 9 of the 12 days of Christmas, which is day 9. 9, is that Lord's a Leaping? Does anyone know? 9 ladies dancing. Okay, well, you'll find out later when your true love gives it to you and report back to me, I guess. But 9 of the 12 days of Christmas, which means Epiphany is just 4 days away, this Thursday. That's when we recognize the Magi's long journey to visit the Christ child. And incidentally, it's also the day when we are going to celebrate the seating of our new bishop, Bishop Diane, and I'll mention that again later, but of course, everyone is welcome and encouraged to attend that at 6 p.m. this Thursday. Hopefully, we'll have some people from around the city and even around the diocese. So that's a great opportunity, of course, to welcome a new bishop, but also to celebrate Epiphany on the day of Epiphany. So, speaking of which, the lectionary pulls kind of an interesting reversal between today, the second Sunday of Christmas, and Epiphany on Thursday. On Thursday, we will read the main story in the Gospels about the Magi. That's the first 12 verses of Matthew 2. But today, in anticipation of that story, we will read the verses that follow it. So it seems a little bit upside down. But we get the aftermath of the Magi today, just as they are leaving Mary and Joseph's home. Now, since it's still Christmas, I'm going to talk about the birth of Jesus, the incarnation, and what it means for us and for the universe. But since we're hinting at Epiphany, I'm also going to talk about the Magi. A number of years ago, I wrote a novel, or half of a novel, anyway. The idea came to me when I looked at the traditional names for the wise men, or Magi. There's Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. And I noticed that Melchior looked like a Hebrew name. Melech means king, and Or means light. So that construction, Melchior, could be translated king of light, or my king is my light. But why would a magus, an Eastern sage or sorcerer or astrologer from Babylon or Persia, have a Hebrew name? As I pondered this question, I found an entire story beginning to form around it in my mind, so I wrote it down. And as I kept researching and I kept writing until I had written about 200 pages, give or take. But as I said, it's still only half done. And I'm not sure whether I'm going to come back and finish it or not. But whether I finish it or not, that story still looms large in my mind and in my heart, especially whenever the story of the Magi's visit comes up, as it has today. So Melchior, as you might have guessed, is the main character of this story. And the story follows him from his childhood in war-torn Jerusalem, as his adventures through Mesopotamia as a young man, his adulthood as a magus in Persia, and his obligatory journey back to Judea and ultimately, of course, to Bethlehem. I began by writing about his childhood as I imagined it, and wrote forward from there, one chapter at a time. But I did cheat and skip ahead to write the chapter where he meets the baby Jesus near the end of the book. And I'd like to read that chapter to you now as the remainder of my sermon. Melchior stood still and rather wooden as he held the baby named Jesus against his chest. At first, he was keenly aware of the small crowd gathered around and watching him, alternately whispering and staring. A sharp chill ran through his blood, and he felt their presence so close he feared that his breath might become short. He looked down into the eyes of the child, and when he looked up again, the group of strangers and friends were far away, all standing in the same arrangement with the same expressions, but mysteriously distant. All at once his icy blood raged with fire, and every muscle in his arms pulsed with warmth and energy, which spread into Melchior's chest and up to his face. As he closed his eyes, a dull thunderbolt overwhelmed his conscious mind. He looked down and saw the body of a 9-year-old running desperately, tripping, leaping, and shielding his burden from the sword and the flame. Racing through the streets of Jerusalem, never looking back or slowing down, running along the narrow tunnel through the rising waters into the blinding light which turns to darkness. Running from death, running from capture, running from everything known and unknown and unknowable. And then his arms were empty. After an instant of panic at the loss of the child, he saw at his right a running partner who caught his eye in the faintest smile for the briefest moment. He thought about his life, but all his thoughts came bouncing back to him. He was simply running, propelled not by what's behind, but by everything ahead. The universe whirled before him as a sparkling wheel of light, with the star of the west at its hub, pulling the wheel around as it shifts from one astrological age to the next. Melchior looked down again, but couldn't see his hands or his body. And when his eyes returned to the star, it grew until his vision was filled with white light. A moment later, Melchior could see himself in the cave again, nothing more than an old man cradling a baby. He glanced around at the faces, still in their old positions. Why were they so willing to wait while he stood still for hours with the child in his arms? "Please forgive me," Melchior stammered, unsure of the sound of his voice. "I have held him so long." "Not at all, my lord," said Mary. "It's been only a few moments, and it appears he enjoys your presence." "A few moments?" gasped Melchior. "Surely not. I have perceived so much. He is indeed sent from God, and yet he looks so like every Hebrew child, like my own little..." Pain and trauma began to knife back into his mind before he pushed them away like cobwebs from a dark corner. Balthazar spoke quietly. "What have you perceived, Melchior?" A long moment passed, and he spoke haltingly from one phrase to the next. "I perceive a new age. This child carries the dawn upon his shoulders. The age to come, the age of Pisces, will be consumed by the question of this Jesus, and the age to follow it will be consumed by the answer." Melchior's eyes fell and his voice grew weak. "And yet I brought no gift to offer. All I have is the provisions I brought for myself. But what good are they now that my eyes have seen the glory of God in more beauty and evil than 2 eyes should know?" He choked as he quickly handed the child back to Mary and collapsed to his knees in a heap. Balthazar caught him and tried to offer comfort, which he refused. "I deserve no condolences. I didn't believe. My heart was so hard and my feet never stopped running. But you, my 2 companions," he said, looking up through tears at Gaspar and Balthazar. "You knew. You brought these beautiful gifts fit for a prophet and a priest. I have seen it now. This child will be a great prophet, the greatest of all, humbler than Moses and wiser than Zarathustra. And he will be a great priest in the order of Melchizedek, standing for all time as a mediator between the divine and the mortal. But he will also be a king, neither of the east nor the west, a king like no kingdom has ever seen, an emperor of emperors, ruling over even the sun and the moon, commanding the stars of Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius." He paused and resumed his standing position, looking thoughtfully at the child, now sleeping. His tears were gone, and while the sadness remained in his eyes, the strength returned to his jaw. Wait. What gift could be more fitting for a king than gold? Melchior bowed slowly before Joseph, turned back to his camel, and after a few moments approached Joseph with 2 of his servants, who together set 10 heavy silk bags at his feet. It is no more than a hair's breadth for a ruler of his order, but it is all. It is everything that I have. May our thoughts be fixed on Jesus, prophet, priest, and king, as we welcome a new year and a new age together. Amen.